Tim McIndoe with a little latitude.
Mr. Speaker, I could listen to my admirable colleague Alfred Narrow all day, and in fact for a while I thought I was going to be. But I do want to commend him on a very fine address that I know he spent a considerable period of time preparing late this afternoon. Sir, we have come into the home straight of the debate on an excellent budget, which started 15 hours of debate time ago. And sir, this is a budget that is exactly right for the times in which we live. So this is a budget that justifies the faith that New Zealanders resoundingly put in the John Key-led National Party at the polls last September. And so it also reflects the considerable plaudits that some very distinguished international commentators have uttered about the work of the New Zealand government in recent years, particularly, Mr. Simpson, the IMF and some of the leading economists who write in very reputable journals and who have said that New Zealand is following a pathway and has set a model that many other countries should follow. Right. Sir, most importantly, in my view, this is a budget that is really genuinely helping our families, helping those who most need help from a government, and in particular, working for New Zealand. And so, sir, as we are nearly at the end of a debate which is focused fully and widely on all of the key provisions that were announced by the Minister just under a fortnight ago, it's really time for the adjudicators, I think, to deliver their verdict, and of course that is the public of New Zealand. The public of New Zealand, who have been watching and who no doubt are watching in great numbers right at this moment, will note the cohesion of the government team in this debate and acknowledge as I do the strong contributions of our confidence and supply partners, the Maori Party, United Future and ACT. Each of those parties, sir, brings a fresh perspective to the table. And each has secured in this budget, and indeed over the last 7 years, some significant wins in their areas of influence. And I want to applaud them and thank them for their contribution. They play a vital role in this government. And sir, the public of New Zealand, the adjudicators in this debate, will have looked across the House throughout the last 15 hours and followed with interest the contributions, respectively, of the Green Party, New Zealand First and the Labour Party. And I'm sure that they will share my views that the Greens often bring an interesting perspective to our debates in this House. At times, I have to say, it really does feel as if they occupy a different planet from the rest of us. But even though they also have a long way to go before their aspiration of advancing economic credibility can be achieved, they do bring something of value to the table. They weren't helped, of course, at the start of this debate by a very poor opening gambit on budget day from Materia Ture, who clearly delivered the speech that she had written 3 days earlier in order to lament the things that weren't going to be in the budget, and then didn't have the wit to think on her feet and acknowledge that actually most of those things were there. And instead, she could have delivered a much more complimentary speech saying, thank goodness, this is the first government in a very long time that has really substantially delivered for the people she keeps on talking about day after day in this House. But there were some considered speeches from many of her colleagues, and I acknowledge that they do have the ability to articulate a theme and in most respects to develop it in some consistent detail. So I think the adjudicators of New Zealand might give the Greens 7 out of 10 for their performance in the 2015 budget debate. And could I just briefly, as others have done, acknowledge today the election of James Shaw to the co-leadership of the Green Party, congratulate him on that and wish him well, and I also want to acknowledge and commiserate with Kevin Haig, Gareth Hughes and Vernon Tarver. But then we go to New Zealand First, sir. Well, New Zealand First got off to a slow start, and there certainly wasn't a lot of depth evident in their contributions. Clearly, sir, they are missing the intellectual grunt and leadership that Leo Afamilia Asanati Lole Taylor gave them in the previous Parliament. But, like the Greens, New Zealand First, too, can actually advance and develop a theme, even though it depends too greatly on populism, xenophobia and Luddite economics, rather than clear principles and an understanding of contemporary challenges and solutions. Most of the New Zealand First MPs gave it a reasonable shot, and some of them would have held the public's attention. I think, overall, New Zealand First scraped together a creditable pass mark, 5 out of 10. But, sir, what of the hapless Labor Party? Clearly, they got off to an appalling start when their current leader delivered the worst budget reply speech by an opposition leader in at least 50 years. The pained expressions on their faces when that ordeal was over spoke volumes, and the public definitely noticed. Yet incredibly, things seldom improved for them over the 13 hours of budget debate that have followed. Labor's woes, sir, are numerous, readily apparent and well documented. To be sitting at 25% in the polls nearly 7 years after they were ejected from the Treasury benches must be devastating for those members and their dwindling band of union backers and party members. Yet they only need to reflect upon their lamentable contributions in this budget debate for compelling reasons for their continuing decline in public estimation. Unlike the Greens and New Zealand First, they've failed to grasp a theme or even a few connected ideas and stick to them. While the leaders of the Greens and New Zealand First made less than memorable speeches, the speech of the current leader of the Labor Party was memorable, but for all the wrong reasons. In the months and years to come, he will no doubt look back on that contribution as the beginning of the end of his brief tenure as leader of the Labor Party. Despite being well into their third consecutive period in opposition, Labor members have no more idea today than they did nearly 7 years ago how to improve their performance. In this debate, Labor Speaker after Labor Speaker has failed to grasp what it is actually about. New Zealanders know that it's about responsible management of our economy, reducing debt, delivering better public services, and boy we are, and that's one of the things I'm most proud of as a national MP. Standing by Canterbury, I'm very proud of that too, given the challenges there, and doing more for our most vulnerable families. And that's why New Zealanders are saying, sir, that this is another great budget from the national government. Labor members don't know how to deal with that. They have substituted volume for persuasiveness throughout this debate. And they've also tried to substitute cliches for substance. Well, sir, that won't cut it. That won't reconnect them with the public of New Zealand. That won't inspire even their own members, let alone the public who are waiting to be swayed. And I have to say that I think the New Zealand public, if they were being charitable, would give the Labor Party 2 out of 10 for their performance in Budget 2015. And that is why we are seeing in both the Greens and New Zealand First, day after day, emerging leaders of the opposition, and I predict that one of those two parties will be the main party in opposition after the next Parliament, unless this Labor government, which is doing so badly, can actually start to learn why they're doing badly and turn things around, because they only need to look further down the chamber to get a few clues of how it's done. So let me finish today by saying that as the MP for Hamilton West, I am very, very proud of what this government does, in particular to help our vulnerable families. Because I represent a marginal electorate, and it's good to see you, sir, smiling at me, because you too know what it's like to represent Hamilton West. We have a microcosm of New Zealand, but there are many families in New Zealand who have done it tough through the recession. There are many who need some support. There are many who have struggled to make ends meet during the GFC and the domestic recession. And so I want to say that I am deeply proud, not only of the fact that as a national government we've perhaps confounded the punters and delivered something that a lot of people didn't expect, but we have acknowledged the fact that there are people who are doing it tough who need some extra support. And as has been acknowledged by many on this side of the House, we have in this budget delivered the first real increase, significant increase in incomes for people at the bottom of the heap in a very long period of time. But of course it's part of a much wider overall package. We saw other measures designed to help families last year in that budget and in previous years. The reform of the tax system, despite the bleatings of members opposite, is genuinely fairer for everybody and gives people more hope, to the point where the vast majority of taxpayers in my electorate, more than 3/4 of them, are paying less than 20% in income tax in the and that is thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is a terrific incentive to them. But these measures that the Minister has announced in this budget are making a huge difference and will make a huge difference. I'll get you to get rid of that.
The member doesn't need to wake up the House.
No. Sir, as you've just rightly said, this speech is so riveting, no one needs to be woken up. But I am really proud of what this budget does for families. And I want to say that I believe that this Minister of Finance will go down as one of the greatest Ministers of Finance of our lifetime. I want to say that I will go to my grave immensely proud to have been a member of the John Key-led national government, because we are delivering the things that matter to New Zealand, because we are making real improvements across the board, because people will be better off, because things are getting better, because things are getting fairer, because our achievements in health and education and across a range of areas are clear for all to see. And that's what being in government is about. That's why this budget continues a very impressive record since the national-led government came into office. That's why John Key and Bill English and their ministers can all hold their heads up high. I say to them, sir, job well done. And in a few minutes' time, I will have great pleasure on behalf of the government in giving the confidence vote an emphatic expression of support, because I know that it's not only felt on this side of the House, but overwhelmingly throughout the country.